I move that the question be now put.
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Certainly agree with the Minister that Part 2 of the bill is the grunty part of the bill, and that's because it deals with the planning process, resource consents, plan changes and variations for qualifying development in these special housing areas, which have been identified by the Minister or through the Minister and the relevant council through the Housing Accord. And I join with Holly Walker in expressing the Green Party's appreciation for the Minister in the Chair being active in that role and for taking a number of calls on the bill. But while the Minister is proud of the fact that this bill fast-tracks consent processes and promises a 6-month time frame for greenfield developments and a 3-month one for brownfield developments, that comes at quite a high cost. And the cost is to local democracy, to development not necessarily being well planned and integrated with council's district plans, and at the cost of reduced public participation and reduced appeal rights to the Environment Court. And I'd like to comment briefly on each of these issues. And as Holly Walker also notes, we have a crisis in terms of housing affordability, but I don't believe we have a national emergency which justifies the ability of the Executive through the Minister to override the decision-making powers of councils and to cut across how they have planned where development should occur through their district and city plans, working with their communities. And so we strongly object to the provisions in the bill which would remove territorial local authorities as the consent authority for these qualifying developments in special housing areas where there hasn't been an accord agreed and where the Chief Executive of Mobi has that role. And we think that if we want sound planning that looks to the future, not just the next 3 years, we need to have councils retain their role in regulating land use and making decisions on these planning consents. And the Minister and the bill are silent on how councils are going to have to deal with the extra costs of where development is allowed which isn't well integrated with existing infrastructure. And the problem that this part of the bill creates is that because the Minister and the Government are wanting to speed up decision-making, it's effectively establishing an alternative planning regime to what exists in the RMA. Well, it takes ingredients of the RMA, but it also changes some of the criteria for making decisions that would exist under the RMA and the processes for making those decisions. And as a number of submitters on the bill said, creating this alternative system may result in unnecessary duplication and costs, and there's also a very real risk that it will lead to decisions around the location, the scale and the design of new subdivision and new residential development that hasn't been anticipated, planned for and agreed to by the local community in conjunction with their council, as would normally occur through the district plan process. And when you read through Part 2 and you try and consider how the provisions here work and the ones in the RMA work and how they mesh, it is very complicated. So you'd certainly need to be a planner or a lawyer to understand them. But my particular concern in terms of this lack of meshing with council plans is in clause 14, which is in part 1, and those criteria there are very narrow because they don't include factors such as the proximity of the area where special development, where housing development is going to occur, its proximity to existing retail, employment and social services. They don't include proximity to public transport, and they don't include any relationship to urban design, so that we're getting good quality development. Certainly the Select Committee has included an extra provision around infrastructure, but these whole issues of where development is located has a major impact on what our communities look like and the whole built form. So where there's a reliance on the market, on the private developer to come to council and say, I want to do a plan change, and to have fewer planning constraints applying, you potentially get situations as happened in Northwoods and Christchurch, where you get roads in the subdivision that are too narrow to accommodate buses easily. So that is not sound development, and it's the speedy development which the bill promotes that is at the cost of sound development. And it's also going to encourage sporadic ad hoc development because of the Clause 32. That outlines the matters that a decision maker must take into account, Mr Chair.
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Chair. When assessing a qualifying development. The problem here is that the matters are ranked and the bill's purpose of housing affordability is ranked first. So that means decision makers must give greater weight to housing affordability and promoting that than the usual matters in the Resource Management Act. And as the Hamilton City Council said, and I quote, "This raises and prioritises undefined residential development as being of greater significance than other forms of development in New Zealand and undermines the intent and effectiveness of the RMA and consent authorities' ability to make informed, balanced and sensible decisions on development matters." The last matter I want to comment about, Mr Chair, is the other cost of fast-tracking, which is the reduced ability for the public and councils to participate in the planning process. And that's because my understanding of the provisions in the supplementary order paper and the bill itself is that it's going to provide a form of limited notification where the decision maker has to consult the local authority, the adjacent landowners and any infrastructure providers and anybody who's authorised a designation. But if those parties are consulted and agree, there's no need for it to go out to public submissions. So that means that if this is not consistent with a plan, the public doesn't get a right to say, well, we don't like this because it's going to allow development in an area where we'd prefer to see it provided as open space, for example, where we think it has impacts on amenity or landscape issues. And, Mr Chair, we want compact, livable cities where people can connect with each other and with good public transport. That means if we've got ad hoc sporadic development, we're not going to get the good planning that you'd normally get through a city and district plan and metropolitan urban limits. If we have development occurring outside of those urban limits, it's a recipe for sprawl. It may be more affordable because land prices are cheaper, but it's not affordable to the people who live in those houses because they will have much higher transport costs. And that's what we've seen in Melbourne, where a lot of the houses further out are not selling. There's been a glut of them, and they're not affordable for the people who live in them because of the very high transport costs. So we need integrated development, and, Mr Chair, this bill does not promote that.
Paul Foster-Bell.
I move that the question be now put.
Question is that the question be now put. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct the party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
The ayes are 63, the noes are 57. The questions will now be put. And the first questions are the amendments on the Minister's typescript amendments sheet to clauses 22, 23, 27, 28, 42, 50, 51, 53, 54, 64, 66A, 69, 72, 73 and 78 as set out in SOP number 351. The question is the Minister's amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
Ayes are 63, noes 57. The amendments are agreed to. So we move then to the Minister's amendments as amended, set out on SOP number 351. Question is that these amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct the party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 vote in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
Ayes are 63, noes 57. The Minister's amendments are agreed to. We come to the first of Phil Twyford's amendments set out on SOP number 342. The question is the amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. No. Noes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes opposed.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 votes in favour.
New Zealand First.
7 votes in favour.
Māori Party.
2 votes against.
Mana.
1 in favour.
Act New Zealand.
1 opposed.
United Future.
1 opposed.
Brendan Horan.
1 in favour.
Ayes are 57, noes are 63. The amendments are not agreed to. Phil Twyford's amendment to replace clause 23 set out on SOP number 343 is out of order. It's inconsistent with the previous decision the committee has just made. So we then move to Phil Twyford's amendment to delete a cross-heading and clauses 82 and 84 set out on SOP number 343. Question is that these amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. Noes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes opposed.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 votes in opposed. Sorry, in favour.
New Zealand First.
7 votes in favour.
Māori Party.
2 votes opposed.
David Brain.
Mana.
1 in favour.
Act New Zealand.
1 vote opposed.
United Future.
1 opposed.
Brendan Horan.
1 in favour.
Well done.
Ayes 57, noes are 63. The amendment's not agreed to. Phil Twyford has typescript amendment set out in clause 35. The question is that this amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. Noes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes opposed.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 in favour.
New Zealand First.
7 votes in favour.
Māori Party.
2 votes opposed.
Mana.
1 in favour.
Act New Zealand.
1 opposed.
United
1
Future.
opposed.
Brendan Horan.
1 in favour.
Ayes 57, noes 63. That amendment is not agreed to. Phil Twyford has amendments set out on SOP number 344. Question is that these amendments be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Noes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes opposed.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes in favour.
Green Party.
14 votes in favour.
New Zealand First.
7 votes in favour.
Māori Party.
2 votes opposed.
Mana.
1 in favour.
Act New Zealand.
1 opposed.
United Future.
1 opposed.
Brendan Horan.
1 in favour.
Ayes 57, noes 63. That amendment is not agreed to. So we move now to the question that Part 2, as amended, stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 vote in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
Ayes are 63, noes 57. Part 2 as amended will stand part. Members, we move to the votes on the schedules. And the first question is that the Minister's amendments to Schedule 1 set out on SOP number 351 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
Ayes are 63, noes are 57. The amendments are agreed to. So the question now is that Schedule 1 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
Ayes 63, noes 57. The motion is agreed to. Members, the next question is on Schedule 1A. The question is that new Schedule 1A be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
Māori Party, 2 votes in favour.
That was
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour. I'm sorry, I'm getting old.
1 opposed.
The ayes are 63, the noes 57. The motion is agreed to. So, members, we move to Schedule 2, and the question is that the Minister's amendment set out on SOP number 351 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
Ayes 63, noes 57. The motion is agreed to. So the question now is that Schedule 2 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Ayes have it. The clerk will conduct a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
34 votes opposed.
Green Party.
14 votes opposed.
New Zealand First.
7 votes opposed.
Māori Party.
2 votes in favour.
Mana.
1 opposed.
Act New Zealand.
1 in favour.
United Future.
1 in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 opposed.
Ayes are 63, noes are 57. Schedule 2 as amended will stand part. So the question now is that clauses 1 and 2 stand part. Phil Twyford.
Chairman. I want to make some comments about the title clause, sir, and I have 3 suggestions for the House to consider on alternative titles for this bill. The first, coined by my colleague Jacinda Ardern, is